Now, how can I sell my honey? What? I know that it's really, really hard.
What?
Gang, what's up? Aaron, Canadian Looney. We have David Cochran back from the CBC, this legacy media bullshit with Chrystia Freeland, looking to get in the way of Alberta and Ontario. What are they going to do to get in the way? Let's find out. These liberals.
Oh, yeah.
Well, a new report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives calls these moves political theatre in the face of major economic losses from U.S. tariffs. I'm joined now by Transport Minister and Minister responsible for internal trade, Chrystia Freeland. Minister Freeland, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, David.
You had this meeting in Quebec City with your provincial and territorial counterparts. You've eliminated a lot of things at the federal level, but there's still quite a few barriers at the provincial level. How much progress do you expect to make at this?
A lot. And I want to start by saying, David, we kept our promise, the federal government. And as of July 1st, the federal government has eliminated all federal barriers to internal trade across Canada. And that's something it's something we promised we would do, and I'm really glad we did it. Tomorrow's meeting in Quebec City of the provinces and territories is going to be really important because while the federal government has now done our part, and a lot of provinces have made huge progress, I want to give a particular shout out to Nova Scotia and Premier Houston, who has been really leading the charge. All of us know there is a lot more work to do, and that is what we're going to be doing in Quebec City tomorrow. We're going to be doing things like focusing on labor mobility. If you can work as a nurse in Edmonton, you should be able to work as a nurse in Halifax. If you can work as a plumber in Penticton, you should be able to work as a plumber in Kenora. We want Canadians to be able to drive a truck from Halifax all the way to Vancouver. So those are the kinds of very specific nitty-gritty issues we're going to be working on. And the great thing is it doesn't cost us any money at all. And getting rid of all of those barriers to internal trade can make all Canadians a little bit richer.
But, you know, Minister, there are certain provincial regulations that are going to be politically very difficult to get rid of. Fish processing rules in Newfoundland and Labrador, timber rules in New Brunswick, language rules in Quebec. You're going to be in Quebec City. Do you expect to get to 100% elimination of all of these trade barriers or get as close as you can?
You know, you have raised three very specific issues that are important for the people in the provinces that you've mentioned. And I think what's important about this conversation is it is collaborative. It is everyone carefully listening to each other. I feel good going into the meeting because I can say the federal government has done our part, and then we are going to metaphorically roll up our sleeves and see what we can do to get as close to zero as possible. Trucking is a really good example.
Sure.
Economists estimate that barriers to trucking, and most freight in Canada moves by truck, they estimate that barriers to driving a truck across the country add 8% to freight costs. So if we could just make it possible, if we could make it as easy to drive a truck between Toronto and Kenora as it is to drive between Kenora and Winnipeg, that would be huge progress. That's going to be one of the things we're working hard on.
Right, but not everything necessarily has to go. It's the big things. This is what you're talking about. Things that would actually make a material difference in costs and other things, like not making big sacrifices in local economies if it doesn't actually move the needle nationally. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, what I actually, David, want us to get away from the idea that this conversation is about sacrifices. I think this conversation is really about win, win, win. I am really so excited about getting rid of internal trade barriers and internal barriers to labor mobility because this is a policy that doesn't cost us anything and will make all Canadians a little bit more prosperous. The reality is that because Canada has made such great progress on international trade, something I love doing as international trade minister, right? We're the only country, the only G7 country that has a trade agreement with every single other G7 country. But the reality is we fell behind internally. And so in many cases, it is easier for a Canadian business to expand to the US than to expand to a neighboring province. That just doesn't make sense, especially today.
So the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, they've put out a report saying that a lot of what's happening here, the moves by your government and provinces, amounts to political theater in their analysis, that the benefit that you, the Prime Minister and others have said is there to be gained from reducing these barriers is being overstated. I mean, what's your response to that analysis? Because it runs counter to everything you and your government have been saying.
Look, David, the fact is there is a wide range of estimates of the economic benefit from bringing trade barriers down to zero. One of the most authoritative reports was published by the IMF in 2019, and that report suggested that we could add $200 billion to the Canadian economy every single year if we had a totally frictionless one Canadian economy. That is an enormous prize. But no one is claiming that that is something that we will accomplish tomorrow. And there is a wide range of estimates. I will tell you, though, I have not spoken to a single economist in Canada or outside Canada who disagrees that this is something that is positive. This is something that will make our economy stronger. And I think there's also a national unity benefit. I love the idea of Canadians trading more with each other, of Canadian businesses when they want to expand, thinking first about how can I sell this great good or service? You know, how can I sell my honey? If I'm an engineering firm, how can I do engineering outside my province?
Right.
I think that has real benefits for us at a time when I feel Canadians are more patriotic than we've been at any time in my lifetime.
So this $200 billion number, just as a final point on the trade question, like that is the number that is discussed a lot. You know, we've heard this is something that's going to take a decade, 2 decades to achieve. I mean, it's not like these trade barriers go away and poof, magically there's an extra $200 billion in economic activity. What's the horizon for the benefit of that in your estimate?
So the $200 billion number comes from a 2019
Yep.
IMF report. I know many of your viewers are kind of wonkish, so I urge everybody to Google it. You will be really fascinated. That same report says that we impose internal tariff barriers on ourselves, so tariffs Canadians put on other Canadians of 7%. In terms of the timeline, you're right. You're right on 2 fronts. First of all, the job is not yet done. And one of the reasons I'm talking to you right now, one of the reasons I'm going to Quebec City tomorrow is to say we need to maintain the momentum. We need to keep on going. To get to that $200 billion, we need really, truly to build one Canadian economy. And you're right, it will take time. Australia did what Canada is doing now 30 years ago. And Australia today has a pretty frictionless domestic economy. In that specific case, Australia has seen really significant gains along the lines of what the IMF report suggests Canada will gain. But it will take time. It will take hard work. I think it's going to be worth it. It doesn't cost any money to do. And I think we are going to find as Canadians, it knits our country more closely together.
Okay, Minister, I have to ask you your reaction to the big news from last week, and that was the decision to rescind the digital services tax on the big tech companies. This was something you brought in your old job as finance minister, and you were a champion of. I just wonder what your thoughts are that it's been kind of thrown overboard as a concession in the trade talks with the United States.
You know, David, I am one of the few people in Canada who knows exactly what it is to go mano a mano with the Trump administration in a trade negotiation. I know that it's really, really hard. And my view is that we as Canadians need to come together as Team Canada. We need to support our Prime Minister, the guy who is negotiating for us, and he has my full support.
So you're okay with this? Because I remember you talking about this was a question of fairness. These big digital companies, they make a lot of money here. They benefit from favorable tax systems in the United States. They don't return a fair share to Canada. Now it seems like they're not going to have to do that at any point with this move.
David, as I said, now is a time we have to come together as Team Canada, we have to support our Prime Minister in an incredibly difficult negotiation. He has said, and I said when I was the one at the table, you can't negotiate in public. That's not how you get a good deal for Canada. I think we can all see Canada and all the countries in the world are under incredible pressure. I have huge confidence that the Prime Minister has been doing and is doing a great job for Canada, and I am really confident he's going to get a great deal for us. One thing that he has said, and I was sitting very close to him in the House of Commons when he said this, that we should all be mindful of is Canadian goods traded under NAFTA, under the the new NAFTA, under the USMCA, under CUSMA, are currently getting total free trade, zero tariffs. And that is more than 90% of Canada's trade with the US. So we enjoy a huge advantage thanks to that trade deal, which our government negotiated. I'm proud of that. We all should be.
Okay, one last question, Minister, because you said earlier the trade discussion shouldn't be about sacrifice. The current Finance Minister, Minister Champagne, is essentially asking departments to identify potential sacrifice. The memo that was sent out asking departments to identify 7.5% in savings this year, building up to 10 and then 15. First reported by the Globe and Mail, and just to comfort you, confirmed on the record by the Department of Finance that this is in fact their financial target. What does that say to Canadians they should expect is going to happen with the federal government? Because this sounds like a big restraint agenda coming after years of expansion of social programs.
David, this is absolutely keeping a campaign promise. Our party, the Liberal Party, campaigned on a promise to spend less on the government itself in order to invest more in Canada and Canadians. We committed to ensuring that the money Canadians get directly, the support they get, things like dental care, things like early learning and childcare would not be touched, that the transfers provinces and territories get would not be touched, that we would make significant investments in the productive capacity of the Canadian economy, investments in things like trade corridors, investments in things like infrastructure. We need that. And in order to be able to do that, we said the government would spend less on itself. That is absolutely the right thing to do. And David, to come back to your first question, this is yet another reason why the internal trade issue is so important, because it doesn't cost us anything at all, and it can make Canada more productive. It can make our economy bigger without spending a penny. That's why I'm excited to be heading to Quebec City tonight.
Okay, Minister, we've gone over time. Thank you for joining us as Transport and Internal Trade Minister Chrystia Freeland.
Oh, yeah. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think about Chrystia Freeland. It's always very entertaining to watch David Cochrane massaging the Liberal agenda, making it easier for them to say words that Canadians don't want to hear. Chrystia Freeland, man, that lady, something special. Let me know in the comments what you think. Aaron, Kennedy, and Looney, like, share, subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching this one. My oh my CBC Legacy Media. Come on. Who do you think you're fooling?
The one we call Canadian. Canadians.